we call trainers. It's just they don't lock. It's just bars that they learn to pick their head, usually to pick their head up to put their head in the feed bunk and pick it back up to back off. But we'll leave them in there from anywhere from 45 to 50 days. Um, we found that at least you need at least 30 days. But and we'll find we'll find that there's some cattle that'll just stare at the trainers as well. And those are cattle that we pretty much just put in the coal pan. For whatever reason, there's about 1% of heifers that are afraid of to stick their head through it. So we can identify those in the trainers, and then there's just non-lockers in the stanchions, about 1 to 1.5%. Some facilities even they'll have a break in their stanchions. We don't because our all of our our stanchions are on 10-foot centers, and that's the same as our post are. But there are some dairies and a couple posts, so it allows people, the breeders, to crawl through the bunk or into the pen, but they can also eat through that hole. Um, we don't have that. If we were to, that's things you learn when you build a facility that probably we would do a little bit different next time is put uh, a crawl through space and through that. But I'm sure everybody that's built a facility can, that's the first thing I ask when I go tour a facility. This is a virtual tour, which is hard for me to do a virtual tour. But I always ask people what they do differently because there's definitely things that we would change had had we known what we know after having the cattle in the facility. In our area, for us, the main thing that we need to do is we have an open feed area, and we need a commodity barn. Where I mean, with the price of feeds right now, we'll have a little bit of shrink, especially with dried distillers grain and the winds in our area. We are blessed with plenty of wind. Any other questions? Well, I think I finished in 47 minutes, so I guess we'll. If you guys have any other questions, come catch me, and I'll be happy to visit with anybody off the mic as well. And if you have any problems, we can visit through it. I'd encourage y'all. I mean, I've met some great friends here, and we can troubleshoot. I've got guys from all over that we can call and troubleshoot as far as health problems or anything like that. I mean, nothing we do here is. I mean, we're all feeding the same roughage and everything. So if you guys have questions or are struggling with something, I'd encourage you to find another heifer guy to talk to, and there's or to troubleshoot off of. With that, I guess I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. As TJ says, one thing we do as an industry, we're pretty willing to share what works for us, what doesn't work for us. And that's kind of unique to the United States. I do some international stuff, and some of those guys are, that's top secret stuff to them. So it's special that we can share what we do with other producers and what works for us and what doesn't work for us. Okay, we got about 10 minutes till the next, actually 12 minutes. So stretch your legs, take a break, and we'll be ready to go at the top of the hour. Thank you. All right, we'll get started here with our third virtual tour. We have Five Rivers Cattle Feeding from here in Colorado with us. I think we went there last year on the regular tour. Mary is here to share what they do there with us. All right.
Thank you. On the tour last year. Okay, so some of this will be repeat for you guys. Some things will be changed, but hopefully for everyone else, you enjoy. I know that it was kind of set up where I give the presentation, then you ask questions. For me, I prefer if it's okay, we ask questions as we go because we're going to cover a lot of information. A little bit about myself. My name is Mary Miskin. I am the Specialty Beef Program Manager at our Cooner feedlot, which is just about an hour north in Kersey, Colorado. I've been with the company almost worked at 2 of our locations, and I will have done pretty much everything we will talk about today. I've ridden pens, worked in the mill, fed cattle, shipped cattle, been a cattle manager, and now I'm in my current role. And I will explain a little bit more about what that role is specifically in this presentation as well. So we're going to just do an overview of the feed yard. So we're going to cover nutrition, our natural program, because we do feed a variety of natural type cattle. We will talk a bit about health and then do a discussion. This is my first in virtual presentation, so bear with me for this. I do give presentations a lot, but as others have said, usually we are on the feed yard and then we go look at everything in person. So Five Rivers has 13 locations in the US. So most of them are actually right here in Colorado, but we are spread throughout, right? So a lot of them make sense being in Texas, in the Panhandle area, Oklahoma, Kansas, and then one in Idaho and one in Arizona. Something that's a little interesting because we obviously do feed dairy cattle, dairy crosses, but our yard in Arizona is 100% dairy and it is almost 100% Holstein. So they have about 115,000 head of Holsteins that they feed on a regular basis. So across those 13 locations, we have a one-time feeding capacity. So if we were all to be completely full, we can feed 980,000 head of cattle at one time. This makes us the largest cattle feeder in the world. So there are specific single operations that have a larger feed yard size. For instance, in Nebraska, Black Shirt Feeders that was just built is supposed to be 150,000. Okay. Most of our feed yards, they range from about 10,000 head up to 115,000. We employ over 600 people across those 13 locations, and we do have a corporate office based here in Colorado as well. So a little bit about our history, because we've been doing this a really long time, and we've been fortunate to kind of pass through some of the best hands in the industry. So most of our feed yards were first built between the 40s and the 60s, 70s. So the Montforts were the original builders of the first 100,000 head feed yard. You guys have maybe heard of them. If you did not know, they currently own the Colorado Rockies. Just a random fact, not exactly important for cattle, but since we're in Colorado. They then began to build more feed yards. And then during this time down in our southern area, so what we consider Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, another company began building feed yards as well. So if you ever drive through this area or have seen any yard with this name, such as Cimarron, Hartley, Grant County, etc., those are currently owned by us and they still go by those names. So during that time, they later became known as Conta Beef. The Montforts then sell to ConAgra, which I'm sure everyone has heard of. They maybe did not realize they used to own beef cattle. They then joined together to form Five Rivers Cattle Feeding. So Five Rivers Cattle Feeding is the governing agency of the feed yards, but not the owner. Most of you have probably heard of JBS. So they start acquiring beef plants in the US, and then they decided, why don't we own the cattle before they ever come to us? So they purchased Five Rivers back in 2008. And then in 2018, they sold to the current owners of Five Rivers, which is Pinnacle Arcadia Cattle Partners. So we're technically a private investment company, okay? So this is the feed yard that I currently work at, which is the Kuhner feedlot. And most of what we're going to be talking about today is specific to just this feed yard. So even though we're all owned by run by Five Rivers, it is all specific to the types of cattle they're getting, the types of commodities they can get on a daily basis, and all those things will change a little bit about what we're talking about, but it's relatively the same across the board. So this is the feedlot when it was first built in 1974. Obviously, that's quite a few years ago. How we feed cattle is quite different. The types of cattle that we get now are quite different, but the size of the operation itself has not changed since it was first built. So the amount of cattle we have on feed, size of the yard, etc. Back in 2022, we finished our new flaker floor. So we do steam flake corn every single day. It's our main ingredient in our rations. And so we spent a couple $1 million updating it, and we'll talk a lot about that because it's obviously very, very important. So the Kuhner feedlot is home to about 100,000 head of cattle at one time. We employ generally around 60 individuals at that location to take care of those animals. And our mill, if it has to run at top speed, we can batch 4 million pounds of fresh feed every single day to take care of our animals. Every feedlot that Five Rivers owns has its own mill. So we custom make everything we feed our cattle ourselves. We bring in raw ingredients and make them every single day. So for the Kuhner feedlot, even though we can house 100,000 head, we currently have about 67,000 head, okay? Obviously, you guys know how the market is going, right? There's a lot of fluctuation on cattle prices. Sometimes it's also affected by corn prices, right? There's a ton of things that come into play. So generally, we're rarely at 100,000 head. It's usually fluctuating in some range around there. Most of our cattle are only on feed for 150 to 180 days. Now, we do have groups that will be on feed for longer than that. So for instance, we feed Wagyu Jersey crosses. We have about 15,000 of them at the Kuhner feedlot, and they will be on feed for about 2 years. Which if you guys know much about feeding Wagyus, it generally takes about 5 years or more normally to finish one, if you can imagine. So we're speeding up the process, obviously, by quite a few years. Most of those cattle come in weighing about 350 pounds, and within that 2-year time, they'll probably leave, based off historical data, at about 1,400 or more pounds. So it's slow, but they get quite large. For those 67,000 head, they currently eat about 1.9 million pounds of feed on a daily basis. We have our 60 team members broken into 5 departments. They probably make a lot of sense to you guys, being in the industry, right? So the mill, they make all the feed, take in the raw ingredients, do all of that. The feed department determines what rations our cattle get, how much they eat, and then they deliver it. Cattle department is from the time the cows come in to the time they get shipped. Yard, right? We're a huge facility. There's a lot of maintenance in place, so they manage all of that. And then office staff are people like myself, our accountants, HR. We are fortunate to have 2 on-staff nutritionists and 2 on-staff veterinarians. So I'm sure for some of you, maybe you contract someone to come in, they help you for a bit, but they also maybe manage a couple of the other farms in your area. We're fortunate that they only worry about Five Rivers on a daily basis. They do not work for anyone else. So they are not always on site because we obviously have quite a few locations, but they are out at least once a month. Usually it's more than that because most of them actually live here in Colorado. And they always have access to our data and everything that's happening through the computer systems that we have in place. So we're super fortunate. We do a lot of our own research for medicine trials, feed trials, right? All of those things. And we work really closely with a lot of the feed companies, right, to test products and do things for them. Any questions so far about what you've seen? Okay. So where do we buy our cattle? So this is specific to the Kuhner feedlot for last year's buy numbers. Obviously, Some of this will be similar for our other locations. But the big thing is that we are able to buy cattle from anywhere in North America, so Canada and Mexico included. Last year, we did not buy any cattle out of Canada and we did not buy any cattle out of Mexico, so it's not represented. But this year, we have already gotten cattle from both, right? So it'll look different. So total buying numbers from last year was almost 148,000 head. The year before was 148,000 head, right? Because the cattle are only here a few months, so we have a pretty quick turnover. I've broken it down into the number from specific states, right? So I could have broken it down even to steer and heifer, anything like that, but I did it this way to make it pretty easy. Obviously, you might notice that we do not get a lot of cattle out of Northeast or kind of out of that Midwest region. Partially, that's because that is not our yard-specific buying region. So if we have 13 locations, we do not really want to compete against ourselves for those cattle, right? We're driving up the price more. It's not really beneficial to us. So generally, some of our other feed yards specifically buy their cattle from some of those southern states and Midwest states. Is there any questions about this? Usually people do have questions. So obviously, the Arizona location is 100% dairy or some type of dairy cross. Within the rest of the company, it really fluctuates. We have 2 of our very small yards that are 100% dairy crosses. Our yard is about 15,000 of those 67 are dairy crosses. So as a whole, it's a relatively small number because most are still some type of Angus or other type of cross, but it's definitely increasing over the last few years. When I first started 7 years ago, we did not have any dairy crosses on the feed yard. So we've seen a really big spike in them over the last few years. So it's probably 20 to 30%. Any other questions about the map? So this video is just to give you kind of a view of the feed yard, right? You guys are not able to go. And this is a bit of an older video, but it'll show you the true size and scope of the feed yard. And this is just a really great example since you guys don't get to see. And then we can talk about it after. Any questions from the video? So some big things to notice, since we're not able to actually go out onto the feed yard, obviously, is size, right? The feed yard is over 400 acres in size. You probably noticed just from those small clips, there's a lot of different pen sizes, right? We're very specific about how many cattle go in each pen. Each bunk is measured and the depth of the pen is measured to give us an accurate number of the specific amount of cattle we can place in there. We also are specific on how many cows go in a particular pen based off some of the health risks and maybe the feed rations those cattle are on. About making sure we're not overcrowding. We kind of have a minimum amount of room each needs, generally square foot wise. Each of our animals needs a minimum of 160 square feet per head. And then bunk is usually 14 or more inches, right? We've kind of done research to see specifics for our cattle. You probably saw the feed trucks, right, driving, all of those things. And that'll flow into talking about our nutrition, right? That's one of the most important things we can do at our facility because we're all about making cattle fat, but also keeping them healthy while we do it. So we're going to talk about the ingredients, the different diets, because we do not feed, right, our cattle all the same. Dairy cattle are fed very differently than Angus cattle, etc. So we do feed our naturals different as well. We'll talk a little bit about our mill and the logistics that come into play every day to feed those cattle. So there are 3 basic rations we utilize at our facility. We do have variations of these. We feed about 12 different rations on a daily basis, make them fresh every single day. And this is a rough breakdown, right? So not exact numbers, but we wanted to kind of give you a visual to see. So the farthest left is going to be our starter ration, right? You can tell extremely hay-based. So majority of our cattle come from a grass background of some kind, right? They lived on wheat pasture, on the range, etc. They've never had any grain in their life. Many of them are not even bunk broke, right? They don't even know what this environment is. And so we train that into them. So we start them on a very low corn diet, and then over time transition them through to a fully corn and silage-based diet, okay? So they will not get any type of hay later on when they're here. And so as you can see, steam flaked corn, right? Obviously, the big hitter progresses over time. Corn silage is the other biggest one for us. We do utilize wheatlage. We are currently utilizing wheatlage at our facility. It's very much based on time of year, all of those other factors that come into play. All of our silage comes from within a 12-mile radius of the feed yard. So it's all locally grown, really, really close. If you ever get the chance to come to the facility, our silage pits are extremely massive. We are now feeding silage from 2 years ago, just to give an example of how much silage we keep on hand at one time. The other is the ground hay. So we do utilize alfalfa in our rations. Our alfalfa generally is grown here in Colorado or is brought in from southern Wyoming. So we're very fortunate that we are some of the top states for growing alfalfa. And so it's all local to us. We also feed our cattle grass hay, but that's usually a secondary source that we kind of give to them off of a hay truck throughout the day. And that's kind of case by case basis. And then we utilize dry distillers. You guys obviously are very accustomed to this. Many people don't know what that is. We utilize dry instead of wet. It's easier for us to get, and we do store it in our elevator as well. And then for us, liquid is not water or anything like that. We utilize a multitude of other products to help with protein sources for our cattle. So some of our facilities utilize tallow, whey, palm oil, soybean oil, corn oil. We custom make a natural finisher, and it's a molasses-based product that our nutritionists designed themselves, and we have made at a local facility near us. So at our facility, we utilize whey, soybean oil, and then the natural finisher. So pretty simple, right? And then micros. Micros, we actually in our ration, and we also do not really give it to our cattle in any other capacity, because if we have a balanced diet, they should be getting it from all of the rest of their nutrition. So for us, it would be agonist and things along those lines. Any questions about the rations? So our dairy cattle generally come from some type of grain-based background, right? They're accustomed to it. Their nutritional needs are really different. And so instead of starting them on that first ration, which is the extremely hay-based one, they usually start in the middle playing field. So they already start on a much heavier grain diet. Even though they take longer to grow, they come quite small. We find they're more successful if we actually start them on a heavier grain diet than we would our other cattle. So mill layout, right? We would literally go to the mill. We'd get to eat steam flaked corn if you wanted to, things like that. But since we don't actually get to watch, I'm just going to kind of show you the layout of our milling system. And so steam flaking corn is our biggest commodity. And so we start our steam flakers at about 4 a.m. and we flake about 30 tons an hour. We can do up to 70 tons an hour. We don't need to, so we run slow. And we steam flake our corn with a steam of over 200 degrees, usually for about 2 hours before it's flaked. Our flakers are, I believe, the second largest size you can purchase. So they're really, really large, super nice. They flake really, really fast and very, very consistent. We do check our flakers multiple times a day to make sure the flake weight, starch availability, moisture level, et cetera, is accurate, right? So that's very specific for our cattle. They go into flake boxes. So all of our boxes for our ingredients have a scale built in. So we work on a negative weigh system. And so instead of a loader having to manually load our trucks, it can weigh itself. And so we program it to say, you're going to feed make this many of these rations. It knows how much corn, hay, distillers it needs for those, and it automatically does it itself. So we just monitor it, but as long as it's programmed, it'll just keep running until it runs out of rations to make or runs out of ingredients for those rations. So that'll go to the mixer, right? All of it blends together. So if you guys remember from the video, when you saw in the back of those feed trucks, they have the giant augers. So we actually basically have that same type of box set into the ground. And so the raw ingredients, those ingredients fall in, it blends it all together, right? We want those rations to be really well mixed so the cattle can't pick through it. During this time, we do have a hay shredder. So we do chop our hay even finer to make sure it's the most digestible. Our cows are just easily taking bites, right? They're not spending a ton of time pulling the hay, doing any of those things. And then our roughage boxes, right? So that would be silage, anything else that we're maybe loading with our loader. And then the liquids, micros, all blend together. And then there's a conveyor belt that pulls it to our loadout or our hopper. So it's actually set up where those trucks can drive underneath. They press a button, the doors open, the feed falls in. We make most of our rations on a 28,000 pound basis. Hay rations obviously are smaller because they take up a lot more room. And we make about 70 loads or roughly a day. We feed every pen twice. So our cattle get fed once in the morning, we take a break, and then we feed them all again. So that's kind of the way we do it. Right now, we're starting feeding at 5 a.m. and we get done at about 12:31, and we're running 4 trucks. So we're really fast. So we're actually trying to slow ourselves down. Usually we run with 5 to 6 trucks if we're full. Any questions about the mill? Anything? So our natural program. So this is kind of my bread and butter because I manage this program. Obviously, if you guys know, you utilize a lot of EIDs, right? That's not really an industry standard across the board, but all natural cattle come with some type of permanent identification issued to them by some agency, okay? And so our cattle, we kind of do a baseline to make sure we cover any program out there. And some of the ones we cover are listed down below. And so our cattle, from the time they are born to the time they are killed, can never receive any of these products in any way, shape, or form. So they can never receive hormones. So that means steroids, beta agonists. They can never receive antibiotics or ionophores. Carry and fed, right? So no animal byproducts are allowed. So whey included. And then obviously animals may become sick, right? We're going to take care of them. They will be doctored, but they will be removed from this program and they just kind of move to our conventional, or you could call it traditional side of the feed yard. All of these cattle have to have producer signed affidavits and they're third party verified. So we are paying to be a part of these programs. We are audited. The plants are audited for it. They're audited for it. And that's because we want that source and age verification, right? They get the permanent ID that's specific to that animal issued to that person who raised them. And that's because a lot of this meat is sourced outside of the US. So a lot of it goes to places like China, who do not allow any meat to come into their country that's been given those other products. And then we are actually the only feedlot in the US to be able to sell cattle to a plant to be shipped to Saudi Arabia. We don't currently do it. We don't have any programs that do that, but we are the only ones allowed to do so. And then, so the couple of those programs are ones you probably know, right? IMI is a huge one, Red Angus, Technotrack, Legacy, Ranchers Connecting Ranchers, right? There's a ton of them out there that you can do these programs through. Any question about the naturals? Yes. Yeah. 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 So if you guys didn't hear, he was just asking, obviously, if those cattle are not allowed to have all those products, how do we manage feeding them every day, making sure there's no cross-contamination, right? That's a huge thing. We are audited on it by the USDA, FDA. Basically, everyone comes to our facility to check. And so what we do, because we're feeding so many, we have so much going on, that we start our day by feeding our natural cattle first, and then we can go directly in to feeding our conventional or traditional cattle. We then take our break, we feed our traditional conventional style cattle again, and then we actually clean everything. So we do a flush with a certain amount of raw silage, right? Because that has nothing in it. And that is a really good source for cleaning all of the equipment, the belts, that mixer, accumulator, hopper. We also then send raw silage through all of our trucks in our loader to clean it. We're also very specific in the order that we make our rations throughout the day so that it also kind of self-cleans. So we do have rations that contain beta agonist, and so we make sure that we would feed that and make that feed early on, and then we make other rations that don't contain some of those other ingredients, so it kind of self-cleans as it goes. And that's one way, instead of having to have specific trucks just for natural cattle or just equipment for that, because most of our feed trucks are probably $250,000 or more, right? Because they're custom boxes. The trucks are specialized for all of it, right? You guys know it's extremely expensive to run equipment like that. And so instead of having to have everything separate, we just make sure to clean everything. Any other questions? So most of our crosses that we get, because we do get, for example, a lot of Jersey crosses, they all do come with EIDs. On our end, they are not natural, so they do not stay in the program. So we actually do not keep that traceability for those. But for ones that go within our Mishima Reserve program, so like I said, we have those Jersey Wagyu crosses. We have about 50, and so they are all EID verified. They are a bit of a different program than some of the other ones because they are able to receive antibiotics, right? So every program is a little different. So their specialty does not allow them to have those other ingredients, but they can receive antibiotics up into the last 100 days on feed before slaughter. So that's just kind of a specific thing. So cattle performance. So this slide is specific for steers. The left two columns are average daily gain, and the right two columns are conversion. Light gray is natural, dark gray is traditional. And so our natural cattle usually gain on average 2.8 pounds a day, versus our other cattle is 3.5 pounds. But our naturals have to eat a lot more. So they need about 7.5 pounds of grain per pound of gain, versus our other cattle is 5.8. Right? That probably makes sense because they cannot have ionophores, beta agonists, all of steroids, right? Which make cattle just better in the sense of conversion, less waste. You know, they don't need more feed. That also goes into how long are they here and their overall performance. So this is not specific to steers. This is now heifers and steers combined. So the numbers will look a little different. But normally our natural cattle, not including the Wagyus, because like I said, they'll be here about 2 years. Most of them are here about a month longer. And they usually go out weighing less, right? And so most of our naturals are here about 184 days. Our other cattle are about 168. And our naturals go out weighing 1360, and our traditional is about 1420. Once again, that probably makes sense after everything we just talked about. Any question about performance? Anything surprise you? Our dairy crosses usually leave at a similar weight, maybe a little 100 or so pounds smaller, depending on. So herd health. So there's a bunch of ways we focus on health. One of the biggest ones is BQA. Are any of you part of BQA? I know you guys have quite a few things in place within the association. Anything? Well, we utilize BQA. We annually train all of our employees. It was created by ranchers for ranchers, and it has a lot to do with the general focus of how we treat our cattle, where we administer medicine, how much you give in a spot. Because years ago, there was a huge issue where a majority of meat that would end up going to the plant, in those you would find needles, darts, right, abscesses, all of these things. And so a lot of the quality of the meat was just having to be removed, and we weren't being paid for it. And so they've worked very hard to train people in better practices to make sure that we're producing a really good, high quality product that can actually end up in stores. Our feed yard actually won the National BQA Feed Yard of the Year award in 2022. Another thing we really do for health is initial processing, right? A lot of our cattle, some of them come from sale barns, so you know none of their history. Other cattle come direct from ranch. Okay, so you get a lot of variety. So there's a couple different things we do to make sure everyone's ideally on an even playing field. So we use different types of vaccines. Our dairy cattle all get other types of vaccines, right? They get things for lepto, which we do not give to our other cattle because they are not as at risk for it. We also give two types of wormers. We give both oral and injectable. We actually do not give our dairy crosses any type of wormer because the way that they are raised is in a very different environment, and we find that they do not benefit from receiving any type of wormer. So we just don't do it. Obviously, our non-naturals will receive some type of implant 1 to 2 times during their time at our facility. They also receive their identifications at this time, and case-by-case basis, they will receive some type of therapy. We utilize Draxin up front. Any questions about initial processing? Usually we end up going to our processing barns. We get a walk through the whole facility. It's really cool if you ever do get the chance to come out. Sometimes our processing crew is actually working on animals. So I'll just give you some numbers. So obviously last year we bought 147,000 head. Generally speaking, we ship 1,000 to 3,000 head of cattle to the slaughterhouse a week. So ideally we want to get roughly that amount of cattle in. So we can get a couple thousand in, even we can get 1,000 in 1 day. And so our processing crew generally process about 1,000 to 1,400 head of cattle a day, okay? Usually an animal is in the chute for 45 seconds or less, and that is with receiving all these things listed, and all of our heifers are ultrasounded. So even if they're pregged open, any of those things, we still double check for accuracy. If our cattle are young enough or any of the dairy crosses, we do not preg check them because they're not exposed or being too young. It's rather dangerous for us to be doing so. So we do not check those. Obviously, if something is bred, we do administer Lutalice and an antibiotic for her to abort. We do tag her, place her separately to be able to monitor her to make sure she does. Because as you guys know, corn feeding a calf usually does not end up well, especially because most of our heifers that come in are 10 months or so old. So ideally, at that point, we don't want them to be bred, and we don't want them to be especially late day bred, which we do find also. And so part of that, right, making sure they're working through the system quickly is really important because it's low stress on the cattle. And our facility was designed by Temple Grandin. So a lot of the flow and things that you would see if you came to our facility are all by her. Some other things that we have at any of our processing barns, hospitals, loadout facilities is that any concrete the cattle do walk on has a stamp like pressed in, so it adds natural texture to the ground. So easy to clean, and Colorado gets really cold and icy, so that's a big problem for slipping. And then throughout our snake and our chute and our scale, we actually have running water while the cattle are being processed. So there's a great system the cows walk on. And so it actually means that as the cows go through our barn, it's self-cleaning, right? So if you're working 1,400 head of cattle, you guys know, creates a lot of waste. There's also a lot of disease spread because most of those cattle are coming from different places. And so it's kind of a process that self-cleans, right? And then we repurpose that water later on. Our involvement. So we're a very large organization, right? There's a lot we can do for our communities. And so one of them specific to Colorado is Beef Sticks for Backpacks. It was actually co-founded by the owner of Five Rivers. And so we all know some people, and especially young children in our communities, do not always have access to food besides when they go to school. Right? And so we have joined up with their food to children in need through a backpack program. And so we created a beef stick product through 100% donations to be given out because it's very shelf stable, right? You can't trust kids to take home any type of raw meat and then also assume someone's at home to cook it for them, right? And so we created a beef stick product. It's made actually at the CSU meat labs. And the only thing that's paid for is the students' hourly wage to make them. Otherwise, packaging, even all that is free. And so we have passed out almost 3 million beef sticks since it was first founded. And right now, last year, we gave out almost 300,000. So we're hoping to increase it to every single community in Colorado. We're not quite there yet, but we've really seen a really big growth and impact for that. And then the other one is CSU Ag Next. If you ever get the chance to go, I highly encourage everyone to go. But we probably have all heard that agriculture is ruining the world and cow farts produce the most methane, right? There's all these things we hear. But have you guys ever looked into those studies that they link to show where they're getting this data from? If you have not, it's rather interesting to look at because they're really old, really skewed numbers. The pool that they use to get the data is extremely small. And so CSU Ag Next is basically trying to reproduce those types of studies. If we don't have a baseline for how we are impacting the environment, how are we really supposed to be able to fix it? And so we have donated cattle, equipment, and money to help support them because in the long run, right, that will benefit us by knowing what can we do and what can we not do better. Speaking on the environmental side of it, we actually have our own environmental team at Five Rivers. And so they're constantly worrying about what each feed yard is doing, right? Because every state has very different regulations on what they do. Colorado is really specific on water rights. So Colorado is almost always in a drought. There's only been a few years that I know of that we have not been. And so we have to be really careful on how we maintain water, repurpose our water, et cetera. So a big topic is, what do we do for cooling our cattle off? In the last presentation, they said, right, they don't have shades, they don't have anything like that. We also don't utilize those because Colorado rarely gets that hot, okay? It maybe gets up to 100 for a day or so throughout the summer, but at night, just like they said, it gets very, very cool. And so to cool our cattle off and reduce dust, we actually have a sprinkler system throughout the entire feed yard. So it pulls water from our lagoons that we've saved up over time, and it actually sprays it onto the pens. They're automatic, they self-run for a set amount of time, and it rotates through the entire feed yard on its own. So we save a lot of water by utilizing the lagoon water, and then it makes the cattle cooled off, reduces dust for respiratory and other illnesses we might see. Another thing that's really cool at our feed yard is that we custom made our own water filtration system for our cattle that is attached to our wells. And so none of our water tanks have electricity. They all work on a float system, right? So when the cattle come to drink, the float goes down, pulls in fresh water. But during winter, you would think we'd have issues with freezing. And so we create an overflow system. So running water has a hard time freezing. And so we create a stream-like effect in our water tanks. And then we have a drainage pipe in the back for that overflow water. Then we have something that we call a CW, and it's that water filtration. So it pulls the water from the water tanks into different levels of gravel and sand to pull out large impurities. And then it goes through a UV light to kill bacteria. So then water's fresh, good to go, and it gets filtered back into the water tanks. So we save a ton of money by refiltering our water and cleaning it. So it's very similar to what they have, like a water refill place, etc. You can always check us out on social media. We have a lot of videos, right? You can see more of the feed yard, post random facts, just fun things like that, trying to reach out to the community. But if there's more questions, I can definitely answer more. There's a lot that we did not talk about, but none? Yep, if there's no more. Oh, yep. The Jersey Wagyu crosses. They come at about $350. The Holsteins, I do know when they go to our Arizona facility, they usually come that weight or a little smaller. Majority of the cattle that we get at the Cooner feedlot are 750 to 850 weight. So much bigger. Each feed yard has a specific weight group they usually try and purchase, right? It helps with us not competing against ourselves. So another feed yard I worked at, our average in weight was 600. But we find that the dairies, when we get them in, even though, they're 8 months or so old, they usually come at about 350 to 400. So death loss, we really don't find that we see a super spike just because they're young and small. It's usually due to where they're being purchased from and the health risk involved. The dairy cattle, generally, they come in great, right? They baseline, they've received good vaccinations, handled, fed, etc. We usually see much bigger problems with sale barn cattle, specifically from certain sale barns, right? You kind of see trends. Death loss as a whole, right now, for instance, for 67,000 head of cattle on a daily basis, we usually have right now about 3 head a day pass. So as a whole, right, it's like 0.00 something on a death loss of a daily basis. And across like for the month, I think we're 0.18. That includes respiratory, digestion, heart, musculoskeletal, etc. So it's a very small percent as a whole, but we don't find it specific to the small cattle. It's usually the quality of the cattle when they come in. No more? Well, I'll be hanging out after. If you guys want to talk to me more one-on-one, feel free. But thank you, and hopefully in the future, you guys can actually come out to the feed yard because we would love to have you guys.
Thank you, Mary. I was just thinking, actually, I think I visited the Monfort feedlot back in like 85, and it was pretty big then. So our next session conduct with the pre-conference sessions. I think it's about 11 now, so we got an hour. At 12 o'clock. We'll see you back then.
When this owner sees her cat chilling by the portable heater radiator, she thinks everything's cool until she spots smoke.
done.